Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
Hey, it's James Blatch.
I'm Jena Brown.
I'm Kevin Tumlinson.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. The live, well, not broad, I was going to say broadcast, live recording of Writers Inc. at Author Nation. So full disclosure, straight off the bat, Alex, who's over there, normally makes us all sound like we know what we're talking about. He goes back through and he cleans up all the times we talk over each other, whenever we make some kind of weird gaffe, and all this stuff happens all the time. So you are getting the unfiltered version of Writers Inc. Is there anybody out there who actually listens to Writers Inc.?
Yeah,
All right.
thank you guys.
Okay, welcome.
Yeah, for those of you who don't normally listen, I came out of the traditional publishing world. I kind of have feet in both camps at this point, but I've been in this industry for 30 years now. Very long time, and I know a lot of people, so we tend to get some really big name guests, and we get their origin stories. We take somebody like James Patterson, and we find out what he was doing before he was writing books, how he started writing books, and how he got to where he is today. And we have circled through the entire gambit of every author you can possibly think of. So feel free to check out the back episodes. We did not bring any of those people with us today.
We didn't.
Just us.
Or
Did
did
not.
we?
Or did
Or
we?
did
Maybe
we?
we did.
Check under your seats, everybody.
It's like Oprah.
Yeah, and like everybody already mentioned, we would love to get some questions from you. We don't normally get an audience unless one of our kids or our spouses knock on our door at the wrong time. So feel free to come up to the mic at any point, and we'll.
My dog is usually watching.
Yeah, my
as
dog
we
watches.
record.
Yeah.
My cat. Yeah.
Doesn't
Children.
participate as much.
Okay, but we have, before we start, this is a special day, because today is JD's 10th anniversary today, as we're recording this, as a full-time
As
author.
a full-time
I didn't know we were
crushing it
going.
author.
Yeah, no, and we had a mission
Yeah.
earlier.
And wait, there's more.
There is cake. We have gotten
Hey.
cake from the singing vending
From the cake
machine.
vending machine.
How much do you hate him that you've given him cake from a vending machine?
I've heard it's
I
delicious
like
cake.
Is
I
it?
kind
I've
of
heard
like
it's
it.
delicious cake.
I can't think of anything more
Good.
There's
appropriate.
your
It's
spoon.
fresh and delicious.
Chance of JD eating
I'm thrilled that my wife is not here, because if she actually saw this cake and saw the various food dye colors that are in here and knew that it came from a vending machine, she would probably take this and chuck it across the room and not let me anywhere near it. But thank you so much for thinking that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
congratulations.
So my
congratulations,
first book
Ben.
came out 10 years ago today, which is just crazy to even think about. If you Google me, I have had a very wild ride, and the stuff that's coming up is even crazier. So let's get into it. Kevin, what is in the news?
You know what? We are going to have some news. Here we go. First story. Is this the future of bookstores? At these stores in Japan, anyone can rent a shelf to sell books. In Japan, a new bookstore model allows anyone to rent a shelf to sell their books, creating a personalized display similar to real-world social media accounts. This setup brings back the joy of browsing, offering unique and eclectic selections. With a quarter of Japan's municipalities lacking bookstores and over 600 closures in recent years, these stores provide a fresh way to engage communities, especially in areas affected by bookstore closures. Unlike traditional bookstores, which prioritize high sales titles, shelf renting stores offer books curated by individuals with a passion for specific topics, allowing customers to explore titles recommended with personal enthusiasm. These bookstores have become popular gathering spots, especially among younger customers, providing a space for book discussions and fostering community connections. Japan's government is studying how to support such stores as essential cultural assets.
All right, so we've got an audience. How many people here would actually pay for a shelf on a traditional bookstore to put their books up?
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping somebody introduces this concept right here in the
I think it's a
U.S.
really good idea.
Barnes & Noble actually has done this from the get-go.
Yeah.
Well, at a high level,
Yeah, at
sure,
high level,
yeah.
it's crazy. A lot of people don't realize this, but when you walk into a Barnes & Noble, literally every shelf is bought and paid for by the traditional publishers. So that alcove, when you first walk through the door, is the most expensive place to be. The new release table will cost you anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 to have your book on that table for a week, and then it gets progressively cheaper as you work your way through the door. And you can, as an indie, you can get in on that. Like if you contact Barnes & Noble, you can rent shelf space, you can rent end caps, you can put up, cardboard stands for your books, all those types of things if you reach out to Barnes & Noble directly. So
Waterstones is the same in the UK, and I felt a little bit disingenuous when the TikTok table came. TikTok made me
Yeah.
buy it, which started off generically,
Yeah.
organically, and then very quickly became exactly the same product placement. £25,000 bought you a place on the TikTok maybe buy it table, so didn't quite work. So what's my question for here? I think it's a really good idea, but what stops it becoming that? If you're publicising the latest Freedom McFadden, wouldn't you just go and buy that space up and fill the shop with Freedom McFadden?
I think that's probably one of the biggest dangers of the whole thing. Not knowing the specifics of how they regulated. If the government's involved, I would assume that they are kind of trying to limit the amount of space someone can get at any one time, or whether or not they're dominating all the time to kind of keep it a little bit democratic.
It's supposed to be curated, right? So
Yeah.
whatever that person is interested in, and then they can build up their community and discuss it. And I like the idea of it a lot, but I do wonder if you're not buying the Freedom of Fadens, if they don't sell, how long is that going to last? Because the stores are getting that rental fee to make up for lost sales. But if you're picking books you love that don't sell, sellers might get disheartened if they're not making money. So I would love to see this succeed. I love the idea of community always with books, getting together, discussing books as a community. I think that's so important. But I don't know, like I really want this to succeed. So I'll be watching it to see what happens.
Yeah. Jenna?
I agree.
All right. Before I read the next news item, I want everyone to start thinking, you today are the guest on the Writers Inc. podcast. So if you think of a question, anything at all that you'd like to ask anybody up here or the whole panel, feel free to run up to that microphone. I demand it. Run for that microphone. And while we're reading the next news story and discussing it, we're going to look over to see if you're there. If you're not, we'll go on to the next item. So don't let us down. We're missing a guest, so that's got to be you. Don't let us down. Okay. Second story, voting opens for the 2024 Goodreads Choice Awards. Voting is now open for the Goodreads Choice Awards. New categories include audiobooks, romantasy, and horror. And that's the end of my bullets. So, what does everybody think?
I meant to click on this earlier because I got the email saying that it came out. For previous years, you could submit a title if it wasn't one of the nominated
No,
titles.
they stopped that
Yeah,
last
they stopped
year.
that.
Last year.
Last year. So are you able to do that again this year?
Nope.
Okay.
They said no, but it does seem that, so last year was an interesting thing, and I know that people all over the place were a little cranky about it because they took that away, and then they sort of curated the list. They seem to have made it broader this year, but you still can't write in a nomination. I don't know why they took that away. But I do like that they added audiobooks and romantasy.
Yeah.
I think that.
So it's curated as in the nominations created, but the voting,
So
they don't weight the voting.
It's supposed to be based on the categories, and then as a Goodreads user, you can click it to a shelf. You can say, I want to read.
Yeah.
You can read it, you can rate it, and it's supposed to be chosen in that category with books that have the most ranks. So it was if you rated it, if you shelved it, and I think if you reviewed it, because you can do all three of those things separately or all at the same time on Goodreads. And so the combination of those three would put it in a rank, and then those would make it to the preliminary Goodreads list, and then readers could vote for it, and then it gets pared down to the winner. I think there's 2 or 3 rounds. I'm actually not sure on that one.
I'm going to say yes.
Did you vote?
No, I don't know.
Did you
I
vote?
didn't even
you
know it
vote?
existed.
I did
last
vote. I did.
Yay,
Yeah.
Christine!
Because it was a news article, and I was like,
I've had enough.
I
of
should
voting,
vote on that.
frankly, lately.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you said voting is open, I thought it was another election. Sad
no,
one.
we're not going there.
It's a
PTSD for
good
voting.
one. It's
No.
a good one. Everyone should get a Goodreads account. It's amazing. You can, just quickly drown yourself in books. That's how I prefer to go. Drowned in books.
Oh, well, I've always wanted to drown. All right, our final news story then. Self-publishing's output, I love this one for this conference. Self-publishing's output and influence continue to grow. Before I even read the bullets, you guys should be cheering about that. Isn't that cool? All right, in 2023, self-published titles with ISBN surpassed 2.6 million, double the output from a decade ago. This is driven by accessible platforms like Draft2Digital, Ingram Spark, and Kindle Direct Publishing, while traditional publishing saw a slight decline. According to Draft2Digital CEO Chris Austin, self-publishing is now supported by a robust community of writers' clubs, online forums, and conferences, allowing indie authors to share insights on growing sustainable publishing businesses. Industry estimates suggest that self-publishing is a multi-billion-dollar industry Amazon reports $3.5 billion in royalties over the past decade for KDP authors, with $650 million in the last year alone. Genres like romance and romantasy, pioneered by indie authors, are now driving major traditional publisher deals. Imprints like Sourcebooks, Bloom Books are capitalizing on this trend, recognizing the commercial power of savvy writer entrepreneurs, which is, I'm now adding to my resume.
Yeah.
Kevin Tumlinson, savvy writer entrepreneur.
What was that number again on the ISBNs?
Oh, you're gonna make me look back for that? Hold on. ISBN surpassed 2.6 million.
Wow.
For 1 year.
For 1 year, which is double what it was 10 years ago.
Wow.
Someone was telling me yesterday they read some research estimating that indie publishing is worth $3 billion annually now.
I would completely believe that. It's really interesting to see sort of the sort of title shift that's been happening, because, for years, and I've said this a million times, like for years, it was, well, there's publishing and then there's self-publishing. And then, it's sort of shifted now to where,
Well,
like,
Taylor Swift's about to self-publish.
Taylor
That
Swift
would be,
is
that would be
like,
another
yeah,
$3
she's
billion.
like the biggest self-publisher in the world
Yeah.
we discovered. But now the whole thing seems to be like, well, there's publishing and then there's traditional publishing. It's like there's been this flip, and I, for one, welcome it.
Well,
Are we ready to call it legacy publishing yet?
Legacy
Legacy
publishing.
publishing.
Legacy publishing.
I like that, though. That sounds good to me. I would love to just start calling it legacy, because I don't think it's all that traditional. If you think back, like most of publishing up until maybe the 60s was self-publishing.
yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah.
you're seeing a divide happen between not only is there indie publishing and then there was traditional publishing. A lot of those traditional publishers haven't changed their model ever.
Right.
I've got books traditionally published. They show me marketing plans that are identical to ones I saw 5 or 10 years ago, other than they did a find and replace on the PDF document. I just signed a deal with Simon & Schuster that allows me, I created my own imprint with Simon & Schuster, and they're handling my print sales and distribution, which basically allows me to act as an indie. I can put out whatever I want, whenever I want, but through Simon & Schuster as the backbone, which means I'm basically an indie author that can get into grocery stores and CVS and Costco and those kind of places. The only reason that happened is because Simon & Schuster was bought by a private equity firm, and that private equity firm looked at Simon & Schuster not as a publisher, but as a business, and said, okay, what else can these guys do using the tools and the things available to them?
Yeah.
And now they opened that up. So to me, there's 3 different models at this point. There's indie publishers, there's Penguin, Random House, HarperCollins, those guys still doing the old thing, and then there's Simon & Schuster over here, and then maybe another one when you factor in like Amazon. But if these guys don't move over, if HarperCollins or Random House don't make some changes, you might see them go away. I mean, if we saw a pie chart right now with all these different things together, they are getting smaller and smaller every year. They're big names, big name authors, the ones that generate the bulk of their income, are getting older. They're aging out, and they're not replenishing that stock down at the bottom. So they have to make a change.
Yeah, and their investment in new blood is very, very low. They're very dependent on those big names that you all know. They're going to hang on to Stephen King
Well,
and
the
John
thing is, you
Grisham.
can carry on publishing after you're dead now. It's a fairly well-trodden path, isn't it? I mean, I still read Clive Cussler. I think he's been dead for some time.
This is true.
Do you subscribe to Publishers Marketplace?
I used to. I don't anymore.
Yeah, I do. I like information, but the deals that are coming out for Romantasy in particular, with that were indie, and they're buying the already published books and just republishing them under the traditional publishing flag, and those are huge, 6-7 figures, like big deals. So
Yeah.
That's a shift, right? 'Cause they never used to do that.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
didn't do that before, but I still see that as more of a legacy thing.
Don't go.
They're finding something that's already a
leave
proven
us.
asset, and they're expanding on it and finding ways to monetize it.
We've got a
look,
question.
Her legs are
Got a
getting tired.
question.
I know.
Let's bring on our guest for this episode.
Actually, I didn't interrupt you.
Yay!
My question was, would you say, like, especially with the rise of AI, are the days of, and especially if you're starting out or with a new pen name, the days of being anonymous are basically over, or a liability, or can you still do that and be a huge success, or even successful enough to quit your job?
What do you mean by anonymous?
Like not showing your face.
Also, writing under a pen name.
Yeah,
n-
with
not-
like a logo and, no social media, or if you're doing TikTok, never showing your face,
So-
etc.
I think there's still going to be room for anonymity. I mean, there's plenty of writers, even in the legacy space, that that don't want their private lives out on display all the time. I think that's still going to stick around. But I think that you are going to have to figure out the compromise, because I think what's going to sell books going forward is going to be the humanity of that author. Because AI can be far more prolific than any of us are going to be capable of being. I think readers who want something, want to connect with something, they're going to be looking for that human face, even if it's an avatar at this point. And we already know that that works. If you look at social media, a lot of big influencers don't have their actual photo. They have an anime character or something like that. So we're accustomed now to dealing with that anonymity. So I don't think it's going away.
I think it might be interesting, like if you're creating a digital avatar with a different voice that is very human but not you. I think that's a thing that could happen.
I do too.
I mean, they have all those social media influencers now that are AI, that are selling products. I don't know.
You're so anxious to leave. I'm sorry. If you want to sit, you can. You don't have to sit.
Oh, no.
Okay.
That was my question.
It's funny,
Okay.
in the old when we got really busy, a common expression is there's only one of me. But actually we're getting to the point now where there doesn't have to be only one of you. You can have an AI clone.
It's a tricky thing. How many people here who know who Frida McFadden is? Yeah. Okay, how many people here know that Frida McFadden's not her real name?
I think I only know that because of you, though.
Yeah. So, they had a New York Times article that she did a couple months back. So that this isn't old, or this isn't like private news or anything at this point. But she is I believe a brain surgeon, but she's a completely different profession. But what basically started happening is her book started to hit. She started to sell really well, and people would Google her, and they would see one photo, her headshot. Over, it's one thing if that happens for like your first year, but like this was 4 or 5 years, literally one photo of this person never appearing anywhere, because she was very shy, very private, and she had a day job where she was working. So I don't think in this world you really can hide anymore. If you go back in the days of Stephen King when he did Richard Bachman, like he basically just made up a fake name, slapped a bio and a picture on the back of the book. There was no social media. There was no way to police that. Nobody could tell. But in today's world, there's so much stuff that you expect to see. If you don't have that out there, then I think you kind of get caught. So the only way to actually stay anonymous is to kind of do what you just said. You would have to go all in. You would have to get the fake headshots. You would have to, and you could use AI, I guess, to generate multiple headshots. There's ways to do it. But you would have to have an online presence, I think, that evolves and changes, as time goes by.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of work. Might be just be easier to be a human.
It's easier to be yourself at this point.
Sometimes. All right, let's bring our next guest.
Hey, thank you, everyone. Longtime listener to the show. Love it. You have given a lot of great advice on your show. Your guests have given a lot of great advice on the show. We've heard a lot of great advice at this conference. So I would like to ask you, what is some of the worst advice you've ever heard?
Oh, that's
That is a good question.
Wow. I was going in complete, my brain's going through all the episodes. What's the best advice? Anybody want to go first on this one? I really can't think of the worst.
The worst advice I've ever gotten?
I was told from the earliest age you can't make a living as a writer. Even when I bought my mom a house, like, you can't make a living as a writer.
Yeah.
She still to this day, like I'll send her my latest book and she's like, yeah, but how are they really doing? So there's that. I mean, that held me back for a lot of years. I was 40-something before I published that first book.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, like I credit those particular years for training me. I learned to do what I do. I think if I would have published that first book in my 20s, I probably wouldn't be, a full-time author today, So
after I bought back the book that I had, my first book that I had a traditional deal on, I was told, don't ever self-publish because you'll be blacklisted from publishing forever. So I'd say that may have been the worst. I didn't follow it, thank God, but that was the worst advice I ever got.
I don't know if it's advice, but I think the idea that there is one true path to publishing is pretty bad, because everything changes, and what's good for you isn't going to be good for someone else. And we all have strengths and weaknesses, and if you lean into your strengths, no matter what they are, you can find a path forward to success that works for you.
Yeah.
And so I think believing that you have to do things a certain way is not great advice.
Yeah, mine is similar, and would just follow the rules And if there's anything that I have learned doing this podcast is everyone that I talk to who's had success in some way has broken the rules.
Yeah.
We had an agent on, Lucinda Halpern, who was like, yeah, our query, what we say, don't do that. Do it completely differently. Don't put query in your title. That's so boring. Like, so, and it was the first time I'm like, but you put the rules there. And they're like, well, yeah, but we don't want you to follow them. And that was just kind of mind-blowing to me. So I think I am learning to be a non-rule follower and just to ask the question, to talk to people, to try something. I think being creative in this creative industry is very important. And obviously you want to be like not rude or like stalkery, and you want to be easy to work with. But I think you don't always have to follow the rules.
I had an agent tell me the same thing. He said, break the rules. And then he's, it was in a small session, and someone said, well, but you can't. And he's like, well, there's no book jail. Like, they're not going to throw you in book jail. And
There should be, though.
there should not be. And but also, if your personality is, in the query and that's what comes out and someone rejects you for it, would you really want to work with that agent anyway? And I think that's also important to keep in mind.
Back in the 90s, I used to interview celebrities for magazines like 17 and Teen People and Teen Beat and all the magazines my sister basically picked up. Those are the ones I went after. But I interviewed Madonna at one point. She was on tour for Vogue. And she told me every time she had an album coming out, she would make a list of everything she sees everybody else doing to promote their albums. And once she had that list, she would make another list of things nobody's doing. And that's basically what she did to promote her albums. And that has stuck with me, to this day. So whenever I've got a new book coming out or, something I have to promote, I just look at what's working for everybody else. And then I try to find something that's different from that. Querying is a great example, like what you just brought. First of all, does anybody in here know the best time to actually query an agent? So
Midnight.
It is
30 years ago.
Good answer.
11 a.m. on a Thursday. So if you talk to an agent, most authors tend to do this stuff over the weekend. They write up all their query letters and they kick them all out. So agents come in Monday morning and they've got like 300 query letters sitting in their inbox. They read the first 2 or 3, and just like any one of us, then you start to hit that delete key and you start getting faster and faster, and you're not even paying attention to what's going on. But by Thursday, they've already cleared out all the stuff that's going on. They've cleared out what they really want to do for the week, because now they're at the end of the week, so they're not picking up any new stuff. And 11 o'clock in the morning is right before lunch, which means they're not looking for anything new. So you're kind of sneaking in under their radar. I gave advice once to somebody, like if you go on Google and you type in query letter, your perfect query letter, you're going to always kind of get that same structure. Like, this is how your query letter should be formatted. You want to turn that completely on its head. I had a buddy of mine who wrote a book in New York. It was basically like a Jason Bourne type thriller. And this guy, for a living, he worked security in New York. So he gave me his query letter, and it read exactly like it was supposed to. Here's the title, here's the tagline, it's about this. I changed the whole thing and put his first sentence as, "I carry a gun in New York," which is what he does. But I can guarantee every agent, when they saw that in their inbox, they stopped on it. So whenever I talk to somebody that's querying, I look, try to find something that's going to separate you from the rest of the emails coming into that inbox and help you stand out a little bit. That's what's going to get.
That's why I open every email I ever send with, "I carry a gun."
That would work.
You live in Texas, so that's just
Let
normal.
me throw a question at you guys. So out of all the guests we've ever had on the show and all the interviews you may have done, and James, you can draw back to your experience on other shows as well. Who do you think was the most influential on you as the interviewer?
I have a really easy answer for this, because I was persuaded by Mark Dawson, my co-host, to start writing a book that I'd started writing before, and like lots of people, like all of us probably started like this, keep writing a novel over 20 years, and then eventually he said, no, self-publishing, you need to get this out. So I started writing it. Really struggled. I did this all very publicly as well on the podcast, and people knew I was writing it. I had no clue what I was doing. And then I interviewed Jenny Nash, who's an editor in California and a book coach, and she talked about what book coaching was, I'd never heard about. And honestly, couldn't wait for the interview to finish, to stop recording and say, "Jenny, can you be my book coach?" And it was transformative for me, absolutely. It turned me into somebody who could write a novel, and that was my apprenticeship into writing novels. I'm obviously nowhere near good, but
I'm disappointed that you didn't say me, James.
Yeah.
So thank you for crushing my ego. What
I
about the
think,
rest of you guys?
I think, yeah, you've both been on.
I probably have two. I mean, my number one is probably going to be James Patterson. I've written 5 books with the guy at this point, which is very much, if you've ever taken his master class, it's like that, but he calls you and tells you everything you're doing wrong. Yeah. That's probably the real difference. But he tends to just drop like big knowledge bombs. Like one of the things that he does is he writes the words "be there" on like whatever notepad he's using, or he doesn't use a computer, he does everything by hand. But "be there" is always up at the top. So when he's writing a scene, he's basically telling himself he has to be there in that scene. He can't be up here, he needs to be down in with the characters. Every sentence has to read that way. So that's always struck home with me. One of the other things that he told me is when we go through the editing process, almost every time we will chop off the end of every chapter. We'll take off the last sentence, the last paragraph or something, but it's mainly because as authors, when we write a chapter, like a chapter is closure in your head. So you basically write a chapter in a way that creates closure, it creates an ending point. But if you think about that, it's counterintuitive because you want people to flip that next page. So typically we write the chapter, that closure is there, we go back through and we strip out that last sentence that leaves it on basically a mini cliffhanger and forces people to turn that page. And like it's something that's it's so obvious when you hear it, but you probably wouldn't pick up on it on your own. So that's probably my number one. My second favorite episode, I think, is Gillian Flynn, because she told us what it was like to write the screenplay for Gone Girl. So if you have any interest at all in writing screenplays, you definitely want to check that one out.
Yeah. My favorite thing, I think, that any of the guests I interviewed said was Karen Slaughter. And it was her advice to newer writers. She said, it's easy to read a bestseller and say this is crap. She said, but I would challenge you to read it again and see why it's a bestseller. Mm-hmm. And I really love that advice. And that has really, even when I don't love a book, I see why it was a bestseller. Recently, I read Andromeda Strain for another podcast that's coming out in January. I did not love that book, but when I read it, I understood why it was a bestseller and why it made a movie. So it has changed the way that I read things, and I found that really inspiring and helpful.
When you get asked what's your favorite book and you've never read a book in your life all of a sudden, does it have to be from this podcast? Or can
It doesn't. No, actually,
No.
if you've done another...
The one that immediately came to mind was when I interviewed Stephen Graham Jones, because he's just a delight to talk to and listen to. But he said his biggest piece of advice was read widely if you're an author. So read nonfiction, read historical fiction, read memoirs and biographies and everything. Even if you write horror, you should read everything, because you never know what seeds are going to get planted and that you're going to be able to then sprinkle throughout your work. And so, and I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I think I'm going to actually draw from one of my Wordslinger podcast guests, and he's technically an author, but his name is Stephen Jepson, and he was an octogenarian. He has a whole thing that he's called "Never Leave the Playground," and he's this like 80-something. Now I think he's in his 90s, but he is very physically active, plays a lot of games, tightrope walks, sees posts in the ground, and he tries to test himself to see how many he can jump from. The thing that I took from that interview with him for my writing career was don't lose that sense of play.
Yeah.
You stay young and limber by continuously keeping yourself in the game. You're always playing the game. We got more guests, so let's talk to our next guest.
Hello. So a little bit of context for this question. I am writing an epic fantasy series, and I'm planning to launch my debut novel next year. But I also like to be forward-thinking, and I like to have goals for down the road for myself, to give myself something to aim for and kind of railroad tracks to keep myself on. Mm-hmm. So my question is, let's say several years from now, I'm 3 or 4 books deep in this series. I'm happy with where it's going, and I want to explore options, potentially bringing other writers in to expand this universe beyond the mainline series that I am currently working on. If I'm thinking about bringing in other writers to write in my universe, either as a co-author situation or just giving people free rein to write a book in my universe, what questions should I be asking about potential co-writers? What should I be thinking about to try to set something like that up?
That sounds like a JD
Yeah.
question.
JD,
right
take
there.
it away.
That was a plant for you. That was.
Yeah. I mean, first question should be, can you write? Because you'd be surprised how many people want to be an author or co-author but haven't actually written anything. I always get a writing sample. Make sure somebody is writing within your genre at least, or close, or capable of doing it. There's plenty of writers that write, love sci-fi and then can branch over or write something else, but make sure, that they're actually capable of doing that. Amazon had a thing for a while there, right, where you could actually create a sandbox, if I remember right, and
Yeah.
you could invite authors in. And I'm guessing that's gone the way of Vela.
I think that's gone now.
Yeah.
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 What you really have to think about, though, it's not just the writing side, it's the business side. I work with a lot of co-authors now. I've written with a lot of other people. The bulk of that work is done as work for hire, mainly because it's so much easier. If you decide, you're going to do a revenue split, that's forever. You have to do that for, forever. It's longer than a marriage, So you have to decide if you want to go that route. A work for hire, makes a lot more sense. You write a check and you're done with it. You own 100% of it. And in my case, it goes beyond the books because I've got film and TV and stuff like that happening. If you've got a co-author and you've got a 50-50 split, all of a sudden that's another voice that has to, be involved in those negotiations. Every foreign deal, they have to approve that or deny that. You don't want too many hands, in your world. So make sure on whatever level you retain control.
So I'm going to poke the AI bear here for a second.
Okay.
There's been a lot of talk about AI at this conference.
Yeah.
And there was a session earlier today that they were showing how you can put information in and have AI write your chapters for you.
Right.
In your opinions, feel free to say no comment. What is the difference between that and or using like a ghostwriter? Is an AI just a
That's
version of a
that's
ghostwriter?
actually
That's an interesting
I
question.
think, can I say first of all about AI? I think I felt this conference, other people have felt it, there's been a shift in the last 12 months. I think 12 months ago there were people going, I'm not using AI, I'm all being militant. This time it's like electricity. It's just here, it's impossible to avoid, it's becoming part of all our processes, and I feel the dissenting voices are unheard actually so far for me. So I think that's a good thing, and I'm a big fan of AI. So. And I think actually someone said this earlier today, and I agree with it. I think we're going to stop using the phrase AI soon. I think it is going to be like electricity. It's just how things work.
Yeah.
But that's not specifically answering this question. I'll perhaps let someone else.
I can probably answer the question, and I don't know if it's going to be a popular answer or not. But at this point, AI is not capable of a creative thought. So if you ask it a question, you're talking to an encyclopedia. You're talking to something that it's only capable of regurgitating data that it's already seen or heard. So it can write, but it's going to write something based on something that's already there. I use Claude, but I use it for creating like backup book blurbs. We used it the other day to create an outline on the fly. We dropped the whole book in there. It gave us an outline, a couple of seconds. For those types of things, it's fantastic. But like I mentioned that I write books with James Patterson. If we get on the phone and we brainstorm an idea, he's going to come up with some crazy ideas out of left field that an AI is not going to be able to do because it's not going to be able to, 1 + 1 always equals 2 with an AI. If you're writing a book and you want to surprise people, 1 + 1 really needs to equal 3. So it's sooner or later it will get there though. I think it's probably sooner rather than later. I think within a couple of years, AI will have a creative thought, and that's when Terminator happens and all that other stuff.
Yeah,
But
I've
doomed.
I was going to say, I've read a couple of deep dives on this, and right now it is imitative. It's not innovative.
Right.
Innovative will come. It probably will take a shift in some technology. I don't know if it needs to be quantum computing or that's beyond me. I'm not an IT person. But how it works right now is in tokens, not even in words. So it just predicts the next most likely token based on what it's been fed. So you can get something that is like a bestseller, but it's not going to be something new. So that's kind of the issue. And I can spot the AI, like if there's a beacon or a bomb or like the light is filtering through, I'm like, that's AI. You can spot it. It writes the same thing over and over again. I think I saw it in the Washington Post, but I won't. And I don't, like, we were talking about some of the shifts. Like for years, it's been epic fantasy has been like kind of the strong thing, but it's been very individualistic, hero's journey. Like one guy is going with his sword. And then there was this shift to cozy fantasy that is very community-based, found family, better together. I'm like, I don't think that's something AI could have done, because all of it would have had was this individualistic hero's journey fantasy. So that's what you're gonna get. And that's fine for some things, but I do think if you're looking to do something that hasn't done before, you have to write that yourself right now. That doesn't mean it's not coming soon, but I don't think it's creative right now. Go ahead, Kevin.
To answer the actual question, I don't think there's necessarily a difference between using a ghostwriter and using an AI to write it in the strictest sense. All the things we've said about AI and its weaknesses can also apply to some humans that I know. So I don't think there's a significant difference there.
Yeah, I guess that's true. If you're guiding the ghostwriter what to write versus the AI.
I think you're going to get
some
a
similar
bit more
stuff.
creative output from the human writer. They can kind of contribute to the soup a little better, but I think, at the most basic functional level is probably, if you're really being strict about the definitions, I don't guess there's necessarily a difference. So, well, let's bring on our next guest who's not going to ask about AI, right? Okay.
We didn't bring our drinks.
I've been listening to the Writers Inc. podcast.
Oh, step a little closer because we can't hear you.
Sorry. I've been listening to the podcast for a while, so thank you for all the advice and insight. It's been really helpful. But I just have one simple question for you guys. What is your writing process?
Sits and I writes.
That is not a simple question.
Who wants to go first?
It involves a lot of crying. I am a personal fan of my 2 p.m. floor flail. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with this. You just get on the floor and you just kind of make snow angels on the carpet for a while. Very cathartic.
Every day I wake up, I do my regular routines, including getting my coffee ready. And when I sit down, and I do a little journaling first thing in the morning. And then when I open up Scrivener on my laptop, I start writing whether I feel like it or not, whether I know what I'm going to write or not. And usually by about 200 words or so, I'm in flow. And I aim to do a minimum of like 2,000 words a day. My process really is to do that, and I use something I call looping, where the next day I'll start actually with editing the previous day's words and then run right into the next 2,000.
I'm not that disciplined. I use the Tiny Habits approach, so I don't know if anyone knows Tiny Habits by Dr. B.J. Fogg. Make it as tiny as possible. If I open my Word document, I get a star in my planner, and anything above that is a bonus. I juggle a lot of different things, so sometimes I wake up and I can write a scene and it's no problem, it's there. Other times it's a little harder, so that's how I approach it.
Yeah, my process changes. I go from hardcore outlining. When I was doing serial fiction, I was pantsing hybrid outlining. Right now I'm writing with JD, so it's pretty much like multiple hours a day.
I will say that a lot
just
of
to try to keep up with
a lot of my mainstay process has been forcibly changed by doing stuff with JD.
Yeah.
For the better.
I break everybody. My day is very similar to Kevin's. I get up at the crack of 7. When I left the corporate world, I told myself I'd never set an alarm before 7 a.m. So get up at 7, say hi to my wife and daughter, grab a cup of coffee, and get to my desk. I turn the internet off when I first start, and I don't turn it on again until I get my words. Because there's so much business stuff and crap that just comes in, it'll just distract me and take me out of what I really need to do, because making the words, writing the books, that's the bread and butter. One of the tricks that I had learned early on is I listen to a thunderstorm soundtrack whenever I write, basically white noise. And it's a Pavlov's dog thing. If I hear that sound, my brain immediately goes into writer mode. I can be at the grocery store, I can be at the car, whatever. If I put headphones on, I can block all of this stuff out and I can just kind of hit the ground running. That's one of the things I kind of learned when I was in the corporate world and I had to hammer out 100 words here, 50 words there. Another thing I've always done is I always end my writing day in the middle of something. So in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a paragraph, I never finish the thought. And what I found is by doing that, my brain keeps writing and just continues and continues and continues as I go through the regular part of my day. I immediately know what's going to happen next. I've got so many friends that kind of flamed out. They would hit the ground. They'd start the day. They'd try to pound out 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 words. They get a lot done, but they were exhausted and they basically wrote till there was nothing left. Then the next day they would sit down and try to start back up, and they'd stare at that blank screen for an hour, and like nothing was coming out. And like if you want to do this full time as a profession, year after year after year, you have to do it in a way where you can pace yourself. My writing day ends at 3 o'clock. I've got books in 150 different countries, so this is where it gets tricky. I have interviews that have to be scheduled, but I force all of those onto my schedule at this point. They have to happen before 3 p.m. Eastern time. I don't care what country you're in. I don't make exceptions to that, because when I first started doing this, I was doing interviews at 11 at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever, to try and accommodate them. And again, you can't do that. You can't sustain yourself. So yeah, that's more or less my day.
I'll do this quickly, we're running out of time. I've had a relatively challenging and rough 18 months or so in writing. I stopped writing, didn't have the right headspace for that. I'm making changes to my life now, and actually writing is really front and center of those changes. So a bit like you, sort of organizing my life around that. I love writing. I find it fantastic for my mental health during the day. I am writing every day again now, but that's quite recent. But writing every day is, when you're not writing every day, you can't write a book.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just dip in and out of this thing. It's like any form of exercise, I guess. You're right.
Okay.
Well, let's get our we got
One more
only
question.
a minute or so left. So ask your
1:45.
question. Let's run.
I'm Rick. I'm a sci-fi writer, and I've got something of a crystal ball question. If you'll forgive me, we'll go back to AI.
Okay.
Where do you think the copyright law is going to end up? And second part, what's Amazon going to do with that checkbox?
Yeah, I think about this a lot.
I do too. I'm
Yeah.
concerned that Amazon may be making their own storytelling machine
I
with
do-
that checkbox and
I
see what
100%
sells
think that's what's happening.
and what doesn't. Yeah.
I think Amazon is certainly, definitely 100% creating its own version of that. I think that's why they're getting rid of Vela. I think they're going to replace that with something AI driven.
The checkbox is whether you're using AI in your writing or not.
Now, the checkbox, I actually think, is my personal take on this. There's two aspects of it. One, I do firmly believe that there's going to be a sort of separation of the storefronts. I think that you'll be able to somehow see all AI and all human written in their own little categories. That's a personal thing. Some people disagree. I think another driver of that, though, is that the EU and other regions are actually starting to demand that people identify AI in all its forms. And I think that Amazon is probably trying to get ahead of the curve with that checkbox.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, we are out of time. So JD, who is up next week?
Next week, we've got Dennis E. Taylor coming on. Dennis is a Canadian novelist and former computer programmer known for his large-scale hard science fiction stories exploring the interaction between artificial intelligence and the human condition. Dennis Taylor.
All right, sounds great. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode, and have a great week of writing. And thank you for joining us, Author Nation.
In our last 20 seconds,
Woo!
thank you, amazing guests who were brave enough to come up and talk to us. Thank you all for being listeners. We appreciate it.
I'm going to go eat my cake.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.